It was the kind of morning where the halls of North Ridge High School buzzed with restless energy, lockers slammed, shoes squeaked against the polished tiles, and the hum of adolescent chatter echoed everywhere. In the middle of it all walked Mia Calderon, barely noticed by anyone, head down, books pressed tightly to her chest. She moved like a shadow between people, silent, unnoticed, almost invisible. But beneath that quiet exterior, Mia carried storms the world couldn't see. And this morning, something would finally break. Mia had always been the quiet girl. Not the shy one, not the weird one, just quiet. The kind of girl teachers forgot to call on and classmates never invited anywhere. She never complained. Never retaliated. She just kept to herself, studied hard, and spent her lunch breaks either sketching alone in the art room or reading on the bench by the gym. But what most people didn't know was that Mia wasn't weak. Far from it. She had a story, one buried deep in scars and silence. It started again that morning, as it always did, near her locker. Brandon and his crew, Tyler, Ava, and Mark, had made it a routine. They fed off attention, off finding the odd ones, off mocking others just enough to get laughs but not enough to get in serious trouble. But Mia? She was their favorite target. She didn't talk back. She didn't tell anyone. She just endured. "Hey, Mouse," Brandon sneered as he slammed her locker shut just as she reached for it. "Didn't hear you squeak today. You sick or just mute?" The others laughed. Mia looked at him briefly, then lowered her eyes. It was easier that way. Safer. But today, something in the air felt different. Charged. And then it happened. Brandon, bigger than most boys his age, driven by some sick need to impress, slapped her books out of her hands and, before she could bend down, struck her sharply across the face. The slap echoed, stunning the hallway into brief silence. Even his friends stopped laughing. It was one thing to taunt a girl, but hitting her. Everyone expected her to cry. To walk away. Maybe run. But Mia didn't move for a second. She just stood there, one hand to her cheek, her eyes locked on Brandon's. And in that moment, something broke. But not in the way Brandon thought. She dropped her bag slowly, her expression unreadable. In one swift, fluid motion, too fast for anyone to register, Mia reached for Brandon's arm as he moved toward her again and twisted it behind his back with a force and precision no one expected. There was a sickening snap, followed by Brandon's scream. He collapsed to the floor, clutching his elbow, shock and agony written across his face. Gasps filled the hallway. Phones came out. Ava screamed. Tyler backed away. And then came the footsteps, Mrs. Hutchins, the math teacher, pushing through the crowd just in time to see Brandon writhing on the ground and Mia standing above him, breathing hard, her face blank. "Office. Now. Both of you," Mrs. Hutchins snapped. The story exploded like wildfire. By lunch, everyone had seen the video. Everyone knew. And for the first time in her high school life, Mia Calderon had a name that people whispered with a mix of awe and confusion. What they didn't know, what only came out after, was that Mia had trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since she was 9. Her father, a former Marine, had taught her discipline and self-defense not to fight, but to survive. She'd only ever used it in competitions. Never outside the mat. Until now. The principal, Mr. Hayworth, initially demanded suspension for both students, but things shifted once the full video surfaced, showing Brandon initiating the attack. Mia's self-defense was justified. Still, she was offered counseling, which she surprisingly accepted. It was during those sessions with Ms. Daniels, the school counselor, that the truth slowly unraveled. Mia wasn't just quiet. She was grieving. Her father had passed away the year before in a car crash while coming home from her tournament. Since then, she'd shut the world out. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was mourning. You know, Ms. Daniels had said one day, sometimes the strongest people are the ones who look the calmest. Because they're holding more than anyone knows. Mia didn't respond then. She just nodded. But something shifted after that day in the hallway. Slowly, people began to see her differently. A few students, ones she barely knew, began sitting beside her in the cafeteria. Her art teacher encouraged her to submit sketches to the school paper. Even Ava, tearful and ashamed, approached her with a shaky apology. "I didn't know he'd hit you. I was just being stupid. I'm sorry." Mia looked at her for a long moment before saying softly, "You didn't have to know. You just had to care." The school held an anti-bullying assembly a few weeks later, where surprisingly, Mia agreed to speak. She stood on stage, quiet as ever at first, the microphone looking too big for her hands. But when she began to talk, the room stilled. "I know what it feels like to be invisible. To be hurt. To think if you just keep your head down, they'll leave you alone. But silence doesn't protect you, it isolates you. I don't think violence is ever the answer, but I think self-worth is. And I finally realized that mine matters too." The auditorium erupted in applause. Not the kind given out of politeness, but the kind born of respect. Months passed, and Mia became something of a quiet legend. Not because she broke someone's elbow, but because she broke a cycle. She reminded everyone that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. That sometimes the softest voices carry the deepest strength. She forgave, but she didn't forget. And she used her voice, soft, steady, and sincere, to make sure others didn't feel what she once did. Brandon, after recovering, was transferred to another school and reportedly began counseling of his own. Some said he was never quite the same, not just because of his injury, but because of the public shame. But if there was redemption in him, it would take time. As for Mia, she didn't become loud or popular. She stayed herself. But her bench by the gym was no longer empty. There were always a few others there now, kids who had once felt invisible too. They found comfort in her presence, in her strength, in the gentle reminder that kindness isn't always loud, but it's powerful. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything, is standing up when no one expects you to. The end.